Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Timo. If you first make sure that you logged into Slido, I'm going to be using it through the presentation, get a little feedback from you. First, understanding who you are. We're going to do this quick. So you will see a poll there, hopefully. Can you see a poll there? Okay, super. Should be showing on the screen as well. Apparently not. Since I'm not seeing any results, I have to check them from the mobile. Little bit about what we're going to be doing today. I've divided this into 3 modules. So bit by bit, we will be going a little deeper. So we'll start with the mobile development in general and how it relates to probably your experience on web development. Who here is a web developer? Yeah, almost everyone. Then we're going to take a look at different kind of cross-platform tools. Even though I'm from Aptio, we'll spend majority of the training looking at other tools than Aptio, just to give you an idea on what's out there. And then, of course, we will be looking into little code. I'll show you some examples from our Aptio platform, how it works, and how you as web developers can take advantage of it. Little bit about me. I've been building different kind of digital things last 25 years. Both companies, platforms, applications. I've worked in an agency. I've run an agency. Mobile applications I've been building as long as mobile applications have existed. I come from Finland, land of Nokia. Anyone heard of Symbian? Excellent mobile operating system. A little difficult to develop, a little difficult to work with. Not a tool of choice for anyone anymore. Used to be. I'm a geek. I'm a CTO for Aptio. I still code, though not all time, but I have fairly good touch on how the code part works still. I'm also responsible for large parts of the backend code that is Aptio today. I live here in Sofia, Bulgaria. In a couple of years, hopefully I can do this in Bulgarian. Let's see about that. This is my wonderful family who's supporting me. I'm a startup entrepreneur together with my partners, so it's sometimes a little bit taxing. Let's first talk about why not just web apps. I suppose if you're web developers, you've been looking into developing web apps. Maybe you work with some frameworks that make it possible to build web applications. Welcome. While I talk about web applications and the future of web applications, post a couple comments on what you think makes a good application. You can just use keywords or very short description on what makes a good mobile application. I'm sure you all use mobile applications on your phones, because it seems that majority of the usage on the mobile is towards the apps, not so much towards the websites or web applications. Had you asked me 5 years ago where I think the world is going, I would have said that the future is definitely web apps, because you don't need to install anything. Experience comes close to native applications. You can build almost any kind of functionality. 5 years ago, I was preaching a lot about web applications. Since then, I've seen that actually the web applications haven't really been able to go as close to native applications that you would have imagined 5 years ago. I'll show you a slide with statistics. There's quite a lot of research into what people actually use on their mobiles, and the trend has been very steady actually last 10 years. The time that we spend with the mobile devices is more and more compared to the desktop, and more of that time goes towards the apps. Of course, there are a lot of applications that take a big part of the time that we use, namely Facebook. But the trend is clear. And if you look at it from, I'm first going to talk a little bit about from app owner's perspective. So if you're a business and you want to develop something, okay, you probably need to have a website. That's for sure, and that website needs to be mobile optimized. But there are a lot of use cases where applications make much more sense than simply the web presence. Mainly, what we've seen, and what you can see very clearly if you look at how people use mobile devices, apps tend to retain users much better. They engage. Normally, the time that we spend is a lot higher on a native application than it is on a web application. Then, of course, if you're looking into turning whatever you're doing into money, apps monetize much better than web. We have the payment integrations directly. People are used to paying things on mobile on a spot much more than on the web. Of course, we buy from the web, we go through the checkout process and we create the accounts and all of that. But you can't really compare it with the experience you get with an app. You want to purchase digital goods, for example. It's a click of a button. You give your fingerprint or your password and you bought it. What's good to know, though, is that simply turning a website into application rarely makes sense. Welcome. We at Aptio, we have a term that we use quite a lot, which is valuable applications. Most of our clients are looking into more than just being present on the App Store, because being present on the App Store doesn't really bring that much value if you're not giving anything else. Because compared to website, if you have a website, you don't need to install anything. You just go to the browser, you find it, it's search engine optimized. It will show up on the search engines. With the apps, there is the additional hindrance of having to install something. And in order to get someone to install something, you need to promise something more. So the application should have some kind of utility value, something that makes sense. First to install it, and then over time to keep it in your phone, because we install apps, we uninstall apps to make room on the phone. So the app should provide value on an ongoing basis. The installation, if you're looking into getting into app business, I don't know, is someone thinking of developing an app to make money with it? No. Well, okay, good. One thing you need to factor in is that if your app relies on people installing it spontaneously, you're competing with all the other apps for their installs. And the app install price, depending on what's your category, can be crazy, especially if you're into gaming. You're competing with Supercell that pours 700 million in a year on marketing, and they mainly pour it to get app installs. So you need to keep that in mind. But it doesn't mean if you develop an app that the app should be for everyone and you should have millions of users to benefit from it. For example, we have a customer that has a very specific app for finding tattoo artists. So you want to get a tattoo, of course you want to see where to get it from. So you can browse tattoos, you can find tattoo artists close by and make a booking. It's a fairly limited use case, but it actually makes quite a lot of sense to be on an app, because you want to browse, and it's a long decision process if you're going to get a tattoo. And of course, there also, these guys are looking to monetize it by being the middleman. So in short, your app needs to make sense, and it needs to provide some kind of value. If we look at it from the developer's perspective, anyone here developed an app? Has anyone been involved in developing apps? No, good. So you probably already tackled with some of these things. Apps are not web, and you can't build an app like you build a website. On web, you would focus a lot on hierarchy, finding the information, getting all the information accessible there. With mobile, it's much more about the flow. Screen space is limited, and you want to direct the user much more than you do on the web. So kind of the design principles when you're designing an app tend to become a little different than with the web. So we have very little details normally. If you have a good app, there's not like a whole lot going on that one screen. If you have a website, there's this and that and that. Lots of different navigations, lots of different elements on the screen. Apps tend to be much more straightforward. Also, the user expectation is quite different. When you use an app, if you develop an app, again, your app is competing against other apps that the user has on the device. And those other apps, there are a lot of apps that have been developed with tens of millions of euros to provide very, very fast user experience. So the user experience, how you interact with the app, matters a lot. You don't want to wait. So for most things, when we build apps, users expect instant feedback. From a programming perspective, it's not always so straightforward, of course. When we have a web form and you press submit, it sends it to the server does something, and then your web browser needs to download the result. So click, send, receive, display. With apps, you notice very often it's not like that. You click and something happens instantly. Actually, a big part of Apple's user interface design guideline is focused on providing instant feedback. So even if you need to do loading, you should be showing to user that, okay, something is happening. So you can trick a lot. You can do it with an animation. You press a button, the button animates, something starts happening right away, even though we need to make a turnaround to the server. So kind of the traditional web model of building things doesn't always work that well with the apps. With apps, you have to get into thinking more asynchronous, the communication between the client and the server. And okay, marketing talk. Why to go into app development? Why not just to be a web developer? We all know there's a shortage of all kinds of developers in this city. If you have skills, you will have work. There's no question about that. But with app development at the moment, there are a lot of app projects that don't get started because people simply can't find competent developers. So it tends to pay better. So if you're looking into app development as a career option, you're probably going to get paid a little better than doing web development. And then remembering that, because the consumption is on the mobile, almost any website, the mobile usage is already over 50%. And what we're hoping, at least at Aptio, is that the difference between browsing a web and then moving to an app is going to get much smaller, namely that you wouldn't need to install the app. Google has, I don't know if anyone's heard of instant apps. Anyone? Yeah. Google has a very interesting initiative on pushing apps directly from the browser. So basically, it will install parts of an app on the fly without you having to install anything. We really hope Apple is going to follow suit on this, especially considering how bad App Store at the moment is in terms of finding things. App projects tend to be bigger, especially if they natively develop. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later more. But app development projects are normally a lot bigger projects than web development. And of course, if you're a developer, more you know, the better, because it will make you better at everything that you do, all the experience that you gain. And these days, you can very well leverage the existing skills that you have from web development. So if you're a JavaScript developer, PHP developer, the move into the mobile can be fairly smooth. So the thing to remember is that we're talking about application development, not web development. And if you look at the development process, this is borrowed from our friends at Andalasoft that do outsourced mobile development projects. I thought it was one of the best outlines what happens during the development project. So of course you start with the idea. Unlike with web development, a lot of the app projects are actually pretty much waterfall. Actually, let's try the poll. So I'm going to ask you whether you have experience on the agile development. Ready? Steady? Answers? Agile development, in sense, in its basic form, makes a hell of a lot of sense. Because normally you start with an idea, whether it's about a web app or a mobile app or a website, and you start with the idea. You start with a basic concept. When your concept meets the real world, you often notice that a lot of the assumptions that you put in were maybe not quite right and need more adjustments. I'm sure there are a lot of courses on the agile methodology here. Reason why it's used less on mobile projects, why mobile projects tend to be more waterfall oriented, is that making those changes later on in the development cycle can get very, very expensive. So the normal flow with the app development project is that you spend a fair amount of time with your prototype. So there are a lot of different tools for making clickable prototypes. You can make screen designs, let people click, you give it to friends, or preferably to people who are not friends, to get feedback on how the flow works, how the app's concept in itself works. You come up with the feature set, then you need a design, and usually only at this point you can really start estimating how much work is going to go in there. Even a seemingly small thing, seemingly small interaction can inflate the development time a lot. And then during the app development, of course, testing is one of the pain points with app development. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well. You do some kind of a beta release to a limited audience. You gather more feedback. You try to understand how your app works. You need to have some analytics tool to understand how people truly use the app. And then finally, you get to App Store. You release it with a big bang, and then you have a limited number of downloads and you wonder what you did wrong. One of the things with apps is what I've seen in practice is that a lot of apps, if they provide the utility value, the growth curve can be quite different. So it can start slowly, but then it can continue for a very long time. Some of the apps have a tremendously long lifetime without making any changes. That's a little bit more messy. Look at the same thing. I'm not going to spend time here, but the main takeaway here is that 18 weeks is even quite optimistic in many cases. There are a lot of app development projects that take half a year, even more, before they even see the App Store. So you as a developer, once you get into mobile app development, you're probably going to think, okay, it's not really that difficult. I can really put it together in a couple of weeks. And in some cases you can. Or you approach a development company and it all seems much more simpler on the outset. But then when you start looking at all these different things, if you need to do iterations here, the time tends to get a lot longer. So development cost and time to market, it hasn't really changed much last 10 years. That's actually a primary reason why Aptio was born. Aptio, kind of the beginning of Aptio started, I was running a digital agency, and we would make a lot of proposals to our clients about applications. And the clients loved them. When they saw the slides, they were ready to buy. This is what we need. Then when we got to the second point and we actually had the work estimates and the timetable, majority of those projects actually dropped off. Because kind of the client perspective when you're buying an app is that, okay, it's a little like a website. It's a little like buying web development. It can't be that much different. Well, it is, in most cases. So we're going to look at some alternative ways of building applications. We have purely web applications. You probably downloaded some application and then you wondered, what is this? It behaves like a website. It looks like a website. It's probably because it's just a website. So there are applications and there are tools for wrapping your mobile site into an application. What we've seen recently, though, is that Apple has started rejecting majority of those applications. When you get into mobile development, you have Google and Google's Play Store that you need to work with, which is fairly straightforward. And then you have Apple's App Store that is anything but. They are a pain in the ass to work with most of the times. They reject apps with the various different reasons that you couldn't really expect. And they also steer the market. We had a very good example because we keep tabs on other companies that make tools that make it easy to build applications. And there were several companies about to go out of business just recently because they couldn't anymore get their apps approved by Apple. Apple's justification was that because it's a do-it-yourself builder that just downloads the data from the website. It doesn't make enough sense for these apps to be in the App Store, so they started categorically rejecting these apps. So wrapper can be used if you're making a prototype so that you have a existing web application that you wanna try how it feels as an app, but that's about as far as it goes. Then different kind of cross-platform tools. We're gonna look at a few of those. and of course native apps. If you develop native apps, you need to develop a different application for iOS and different application for Android. On iOS you use either Swift mostly these days. On Android you use Java. They're completely different environments. But in terms of providing that best user experience, there's really no beating the native apps. So if we look at the differences, with the cross-platform tools, if you worked with JavaScript, you know how it is. You start your project, then you write npm install, and then you have tons of dependencies for your project. All of a sudden, your hello world became 130 megabytes. On mobile world, these dependencies can become problematic because most of the cross-platform frameworks work so that you have the JavaScript and then you have native components, and it's like building from Legos. But the problem is that not all Legos are provided by the Danish Lego company, so they might not fit perfectly together. Especially they might not fit very well together when there's a big OS operating system update. Then with a lot of the cross-platform tools, the basic things you can already get to a very, very native feeling. But you still easily run to a situation where you need to create something using JavaScript, and it doesn't fully compare with what you see on the native apps. And of course, there are huge differences on the cross-platform tools in general. As many times said, the native apps, you need to spend more time developing on them. But they're also most reliable to maintain. Normally, if your app is developed well and there's an OS update, you really shouldn't have to worry about that. Of course, over years, if you want to keep it there for many years, both Google and Apple, they clean up the stores. So if you have 32-bit applications still on the iOS store, they are pulled out from there. And then, of course, no limitations, depending on what you want to do. Majority of the mobile apps, they're pretty basic. They use kind of the same kind of components and same kind of flows. But if you want to build a sound analyzer, video editor, or something that relies much more on the powerful hardware that you have here, then you don't really have any other option than to go with native. So performance and the feel. The feel is really the most important thing, I would claim. You can freely disagree if you want. Oh, by the way, the Slido, you can also post questions there. So if you come up with a question or a notion, or if you think I'm full of shit and something should be corrected, please write it down there. I'll check it in a bit. The feel it's about milliseconds. It's not so much about just having something that looks the same as all the other apps. It's the feeling that you get when you click on something, how fast it happens, and the attention span and the frustration level grows very fast with the applications, much more so than with websites. With websites, we know, okay, it's a slow internet, it's loading, that's normal. With apps, we don't have that tolerance. And then, of course, if you're looking to use device functionality, there are tons of APIs, there are tons of new stuff, VR stuff. If you want to use Health Kit, for example, in connection with your app, then it's about developing it native in most cases. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's not so nice with the app development, and when you get into the app development world. One is versioning hell. The problem is that with websites, you do 5 daily releases, fine, nobody notices. You have 100 test users for your mobile apps and you do 5 daily releases, forget it. So the applications usually need to go through some kind of a release cycle. And still you run into problems when you have people using different versions of your app. So someone is using the 1.0 version and you just release new functionality on 1.1. If you make people to force update it, if you do it very many times, they're probably going to get a little frustrated with your app. So you need to be worrying about the backwards compatibility there. And then, already mentioned App Store. App Store has gotten a lot better because still a couple of years ago, the app review times were routinely could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Even if you had a critical update to your app that you knew that, okay, this needs to be on the devices because otherwise things will break, Apple would take their good time on reviewing, and when they're reviewing, it's very normal to get a feedback from them about something. And you can kind of predict to a degree what they're going to say, and when you released enough apps, you kind of know that, okay, they're going to complain about missing user terms. But before you know all these little caveats, you need to be prepared for several revisions before Apple says, okay, good to go. With Google Play, you just upload it there, wait 1-2 hours, and it's there. Much more straightforward. Then, of course, the compatibility. I'll show you a little bit about different versions, but not all devices are the same. That, again, is a lot better on the Apple ecosystem, where you can much more rely on device having certain functionality and even certain version level. Testing, has anyone been involved with the QA, quality assurance of a mobile application? It's fun? So. Yeah, it's testing tends to take more time with the applications. And then maintenance. With web development, it's easier. You have one developer who developed the site, something needs to be fixed, you throw it to another developer. They're going to get it fixed and it's released in no time. You have the same situation with app. You send the app files over to the new developer. They're going to say, they will most probably say, this is built shit and I'm not going to touch this. I need to build this from scratch if you want to have it fixed. Maintaining mobile apps is something that when clients buy mobile apps, they kind of forget it from the calculations. They see, okay, wow, okay, now we have the mobile app. It cost me 15,000 euros to make. And then when the first OS update comes or something needs to be updated, they're like, what? Why is it going to cost so much? Then, of course, handling payments is its own kind of a little fun thing to do, mostly with Apple. With Google, it's more straightforward. But implementing the mobile payments, when you initially do it, if you need to do it from scratch, if you're a native developer and you implement in-app payments, put aside a few days, just in case. With development, it depends a lot on what tools you use, but as this is application development, there are much more things that you need to do when you do the development. And I talked about it probably too much already, but hell on getting people to download, whether it's an update or a new app, should not be underestimated. That's a nice little outline of Android fragmentation. Different devices from different manufacturers with different screen sizes. Everyone take notes on this. And if you look at the different operating systems, currently, okay, you're probably not going to support 4 series anymore, but upwards from 5. No, this is not all the versions. API version at the moment is going at 27, and you can be damn sure that there are devices using all those different versions out there. So a lot of the stuff you want to put a drop shadow on something. Okay, that works from Marshmallow onwards. You want to implement some device functionality. It's not only about the API version, because also manufacturers have their own flavors on top of that. How many iPhone users here? Some. With iPhone, you have a system update coming. It says, okay, there's a new system update. It doesn't really give you an option whether you want to install it or not. You have an option whether you want to install it now or you want to install it next night, which for app developer is quite nice. It wasn't always like this, but it's been like that for fair time. So when you look at the app statistics, you see that you have majority of people using the latest version very shortly after it's released, so it's much more reliable. Android is getting there with the latest devices. You see same kind of notifications already. So I would give it couple more years, and we have to deal with a lot less device fragmentation in terms of the operating system. But you still have device fragmentation in terms of the hardware features, different screen sizes. There are really a lot of different screen sizes, and you really need to take those into account, because if your buttons are clipped, no one's going to be able to continue with the app forward. If you want to see bad, you should see how Nokia used to do it at the time, because they had Symbian. I was dealing with Nokia a lot at those days, and they had 65 development teams handling different versions of Symbian that were connected to different devices. So it's a lot better these days. Then with mobile development, I've now talked a lot about the kind of the client side, client experience. But if you develop anything meaningful, you're probably going to have a server as well. So the normal setup is that you have your iOS version, you have your Android version, and then you have your backend. So backend is like developing a website much more. Normal way of doing is that you provide some kind of a RESTful interface for the clients to use, and there you have a lot of choices. If you're building something very simple, Google Firebase, for example, provides very good tool for building a simple backend for your app. You don't have to worry about hosting. You don't have to worry about deploying the backend. It's very straightforward. But then, if you need more business logic, you will be developing a real backend using some real programming language. This is actually I stole it from the native script guys. If you look at the different pieces, you're probably going to be using some kind of a framework on the server side. Then you might or might not use some kind of a framework on the client side. So you have kind of two fairly complex pieces of software that need to work very well together. Because when you click that button, you want something to happen instantly, but still you need to synchronize that data. So normally your development team has at least one mobile developer, most likely two, and a backend developer that need to work very well together. So that's definitely different from web development, because in web development you can kind of put into compartments different pieces of the software much easier, so that one developer works on one part of the site, another developer on another part of the site. With mobile, you need to be very well synced with the backend and the client developers. Our model is a little different. I'll talk more about the Optio stuff later. But this is one of the things that we wanted to simplify. With Optio, you develop only the server side, so you don't have separate client-side development at all. All development happens on the server side, and the client picks up the configuration from the server, which means that one developer can build fully native app. So the applications that we have for iOS and Android, they native, and they're driven by the server. Some of the things that I'm not going to go deep into, but just kind of good to keep in mind. This is, after all, we have 3 hours, so you're going to get a little bit of everything. It's a top view on a lot of the things. But if you're doing serious mobile development, one of the things that you probably need to build is some kind of build automation. Again, a little bit easier done on Android. You have very good tools, and you have very good integrations also for different kind of systems that help you automate the build process. Then testing, you're probably going to need both client-side and server-side tests, and writing client-side tests is an area on its own. So if you're doing test-driven development, you're going to be putting a lot of time on doing those client-side tests, but that will pay off on the QA part for sure. Then the overall kind of the testing and feedback process, because you want real people to use the app, provide you with feedback, understand how they're using it, and how to improve based on what they say and how they behave inside the app. You're going to need crash reporting. Mobile apps do crash, unfortunately. Especially when you're developing them, you're going to see quite a lot of crashes, and sometimes those can be a little hard to capture what exactly is going on. There are tons of good crash reporting tools. If you want recommendations, please ask. I'll be happy to recommend some tools. Analytics, there are tons of different analytics tools, but you want to understand quite a lot on what's going on inside of your app. Maintenance and updates we talked about. Then the whole mobile app world, you keep hearing a lot about SDKs. So you have different kind of ready-made software components that you can import into your mobile client to extend the functionality. Want to have a video chat for your application, probably doesn't make sense to develop it on your own, so you can import an SDK. If your project grows, you're soon gonna find that you have quite a lot of these dependencies, and then you need to have some way of managing these dependencies and keep them updated. And then if you're working with more than just one app, delivering the app to the store is kind of a job on its own. There are things that you need to take into consideration to make sure that Apple is happy, that they pass the review, that you have good app descriptions, and especially if your app is a consumer app, it makes sense to localize the app version so that you have both the App Store information is localized and the app itself is localized, because localized apps tend to get over 50% more downloads on native markets compared to non-localized apps. And I'll just show a little snippet on one of my favorites, how Apple handles certification. Has anyone been handling Apple's certificates? No, okay. It's it's something that's often missed. You think, okay, my app is ready. I'm now just going to push it to the store. Just understanding how the certification works with Apple, because Apple is very strict on making sure that any app that's on the App Store has valid certificates, because they might pull those certificates back. It means that you need to learn how Apple is doing the app certification. So for when you're developing with iOS, you first need your developer certificate that you use to develop. Then you need your distribution certificate to get it uploaded to the store. And then depending on your functionality, you might need a bunch of different certificates. So you need certificates for push notification. You need certain keys for the in-app payments. The whole ecosystem around the apps and app stores and app delivery, there are quite a few parts there, I would say. So let's have a look at the cross-platform tools. I'm also going to poll you a little, given that my Slido wakes up. Has anyone been playing around with any cross-platform app development tools? Just a little, okay. Let's see, what were my... Let's see if we get any responses from the web participants. If you have any experience with the cross-platform tools, please answer this one. Who said terrible? Not here. Probably the terrible comes from PhoneGap or some of the kind of little earlier generation tools. Why there's no excellent. Sorry. Let's take the poll away. Excuse me. We look at three different tools, and then one as a bonus. Is my sound? No. I think I just killed my microphone. It's okay. Okay, thank you. I didn't take PhoneGap here. PhoneGap is it's been one that's been around the longest, known also as Cordova. I have some experience with it with the digital agency I mentioned. We did build a few projects with PhoneGap, and what we kind of saw is that it was fairly easy to get to the first 80% of the project. So you could get to a point where you have something which is fairly well-functioning prototype. But we actually lost a big client with one fairly big app, simply because we couldn't get the performance to match the expectations of the client. There was simply no way to get around the limitations. In this case, the limitations were related. We were using map data, overlaying a lot of data on top of the map. Using PhoneGap, you just couldn't get it to work like native Google Maps or Apple Maps. We also used a tool called Appcelerator, which was at the time it was great. You could get very, very close to native performance. The problem there was that they had a memory leak, and apparently they just didn't know how to fix it. We had to bury the project because of this, And it's not a small company. It's already at the time it was more than 100 people working on that app development tool. But on certain cases, you would just run into limitations with their memory management, and that's it. So with cross-platform tools, we've come a long way. If you look at any of these three tools, they're fairly mature. They will give you very good or fairly good functionality set, and for many things they also provide fairly native experience. The way they do it normally is that you have native components that are driven by JavaScript. And then you have parts that you develop using JavaScript that are handled by the phone's JavaScript engine. And these days, because the devices are powerful, for a lot of the cases it works well. If you look a little bit more closely, Xamarin at the moment, I know it's a fairly seeked out talent in this city. There are a lot of companies that like to build with Xamarin. The idea is that you have one code base. It's C-based. You have very mature development tools, and the end result you get is very close to a native app. And that's kind of their leading idea also. With React Native, you work with JavaScript. You can bring native modules there. So if you're missing some critical functionality that doesn't work well enough with JavaScript, you can bring a native module that's driven by JavaScript. Ionic is kind of the lowest entry barrier if you're a web developer. You're going to be using a web view a lot with Ionic. You get iOS, you get Android, and with Ionic you get also desktop apps. So if you have a project where also the desktop app is required, it's a fair option. Though, for example, the desktop app on Ionic, the footprint is huge. Its memory consumption is huge. So if anyone is using Slack client, that's running on Ionic, and it is a processor hog. This is not entirely accurate, because these days React Native does have a 64-bit support. Actually, with Apple, you can get your app approved if it's not 64-bit. The problem is that you find components for React Native. Some of them are 32-bit, some of them are 64, and they don't really mix. You very easily end up with kind of a dependency hell, and especially because a lot of the modules that are developed, they're not commercial. So someone has developed, then maybe they continue developing it, or maybe they have dropped it. With Ionic, what's not cool about Ionic is that it's mainly HTML, and web views on the device, they don't really provide the best responsiveness or best user experience. If we look at kind of the evil culprit, okay, I'm a little biased, so take this with a grain of salt. But if we look at kind of what's the evil culprit there, it's really the JavaScript core. The operating system on these devices, it's not built with JavaScript. So whenever it runs JavaScript, it's doing interpretation. It needs to pass through more gates than when you're developing with native code. So if you look at the little quote from the React Native website, I think it's fairly telling. So another problem with the JavaScript engine is that it's not fully consistent. So not all versions, not all OS versions work the same way with that. Then, of course, the updates, which I already mentioned. If there's a major operating system update, you just really hope that all the dependencies that you have in your project will continue to work if you need to update. There's React Native, which definitely would be my tool of choice for cross-platform development. It comes from Facebook, as you might know. What's not so cool is that Facebook recently, they changed licensing in almost all of their libraries, including React. But for some strange reason, they didn't touch React Native licensing. And Facebook doesn't have really the best track record on keeping projects alive. A few years back, if you asked what to use to develop mobile backend, I would have said Parse. Well, then Parse got bought by Facebook, and then after a year they said, okay, we're shutting this down. And same happened now with their advanced PHP engine, HNVM. Did I get it right? They just stopped development, and if they stop development, it's of course the project can live on, but you need to kind of factor in this risk. But software development, it's full of risk. Something might always go out of the scene, or might not be so popular anymore. So you change one evil to another. It would not be fair to make a presentation here without talking about native script. Who's heard of native script? Really, no more. It comes from Xteleric, now Progress. They have a little different approach in terms of handling the JavaScript. Basically, the JavaScript talks directly with the native APIs of the operating system. This means that you should be able to get a lot better performance. There is a little conversion going on, but the performance hit is fairly small, maybe about 10%. Of course, it doesn't have as big of a developer community as React, but if you Google around, you see that it is already used by quite many people on fairly serious projects. So if you're looking into JavaScript-based native development, at least have a look. It all comes to Bulgaria, though they're not selling licenses, but it's Bulgarian made, so that needs to account for something as well. Do you guys need a little break? Should we take a 10-minute coffee water break? Stretch your legs a little, and after the break, we'll look more into Aptio model of development. I'll show you some code examples, app examples, and so forth. Okay, 10 minutes. Sorry to all the web users. That's why I was asking whether you can hear me. Thank you very much. So this is you. With this UI kit, you can take a design, and then the components you find from inside up to your platform, speeding up your development a lot. It's free to download from our site, so even whether you use Aptio or not, you can go to our site and download the UI kit and base your app plans or app design on that. It should work for iOS and Android, so it's not very platform specific. Something that you find when you start designing is that the user interface guidelines for iOS and Android, they're not the same, and unfortunately they are going in a little bit different ways. So probably what we're going to be seeing more and more in the future is that we spend more time on creating separate designs for iOS and Android. Okay, let's get back to the presentation stuff. Did I miss a question? Let's see. Oh, about Unity. Unity is actually a very good tool for cross-platform development as well. Especially if you're working with something that's very graphic intensive, whether it's a game or some other app where you need to use 3D/animation capabilities. Unity also has a very wide support for different platforms. So if you develop with Unity, you can very easily port it to desktop, game consoles, all possible mobile devices, different and Android on TV and a lot of other places. Problem with Unity is that it's a very big tool. So mastering Unity will take time. I have a friend who started with Unity some years back, and then he said after first 3 years that, okay, now I'm starting to master this tool, and he's worked with more than 10 different tools, very smart programmer. It's a very big tool, but if you're looking to develop a 3D game, for example, I would say go with Unity. You're probably going to get best effort result ratio with that tool. Okay, please say if I missed some other important points like the sound. Sorry once again to the guys watching on the web. So the difference I very shortly touched in the earlier part. Difference developing with Optio. It's purely server-side development. So quite typically, Optio apps are built by 1 or 2 at the moment PHP developers. This year also Node.js will be added on the tech stack. The idea there is that the iOS client and the Android client we have, they develop from the scratch. They fully native. They implement native device functionality. There isn't a single web view, and there isn't also any code conversion. And how this exactly works is that when you open Optio application, it will get this configuration from the server. So each Optio application has only few things that are unique for it. It's API key, so information about what's the backend. It's icon, it's startup splash screen, and then certain build time parameters, like whether you have advertising, whether you have payments, whether you have some payment toolkits or some other third-party integrations. The big benefit with this model for developer is that you don't need to be compiling the application all the time. So normally the Optio client application stays the same from the beginning of the development process all the way until it's ready to be released. Of course, we do update the client. Mainly it's about bringing new functionality, new integrations, some new controls. But for your basic application project, you will find all the controls that you need already inside the app. With this, we're able to promise a much better stability, because all our applications are basically using the same code base. So whenever we have a bug that causes a crash, it's a very high priority because it's likely to affect a lot of our clients. So in general, the reports that we get from Fabric is a crash analytics that we use, say that 100% crash-free experience. You will never get 100% all the time. There will always be something that crashes when it comes to mobile apps, but it hopefully shouldn't be because of our client. So when you start the client, it creates the user on the server, and then the server returns configuration, and then the client and server communicate while you use the app. Sometimes you might see it if it's something that we need to change the whole state of the app and download some resources. If you develop the app well, you don't really notice any loaders there, because a lot of the stuff can be made also asynchronously. Whatever resources the client needs, so if it needs sounds, pictures, video, it will download them kind of on need basis. So we put some intelligence there so that it wouldn't be just downloading a one big dump, but it will try to download the data before you need it, so that the data would be available locally. So what we're trying to do with Aptio is to change the traditional model where you have iOS, Android backend developer, and then you probably also need to have someone who takes care of the server side, making sure that the servers get deployed. So you need to have some kind of DevOps, unless you're using Firebase or similar backend as a service. And since you have a team, you probably need a team lead as well. So a lot of the time actually that goes into software projects goes into communications. When you have more than one person, the amount of communication increases, and the amount of time you need to use to sync, especially with mobile apps where the client and backend need to really play well together. So having a team building an app will increase the time also on its own. So there can be obviously more than just one developer working on an app, but one developer with Aptio can build an app from start to finish, all the way to the App Store, with the existing skill sets. I'll show you the code part in a bit. We're going to spend little time with that, so you get an idea how the framework in itself works. So build the app once, use that, fully native apps, no code conversion, so we're not losing anything there. And kind of the purpose for our existence is to make the development faster and less painful. And the UI kit that I briefly showed you is one example of such addition that we built. We're not happy yet with the development speed. We estimate at the moment we're about 3 times faster than building with React Native. We're trying to push those numbers. We need to get better numbers to make sure that we have a right to exist. Part of that is, of course, the full infrastructure. So if you're developing a mobile app, you also need to understand a little bit about hosting a mobile app, the backend part, because depending on how your app is done, so if you have a lot of turnarounds to the server, and if those turnarounds mean that the user needs to wait, then it starts mattering where your servers are and whether your backend is scalable. I'm not going to talk too much about hosting. We're actually putting out a blog post this week if someone is interested on the topic on how to host the mobile backend. Then when you start a project with Aptio actually comes built in with a lot of integrations, because it's still very common to see you start a mobile app project, native app project, and then you spend 3 days implementing the Facebook Connect. It's quite normal. There are a lot of frameworks, but app projects tend to be different. So one way to help developers is to provide the most common integrations in a way that's a lot easier to use. It wouldn't be fair to talk about Aptio if I wouldn't talk about the limitations. As said before, you always trade one evil to another. We do have some limitations, of course. We don't support full set of the API functionality that you find from the operating system. And we're probably not the platform if you're looking to build a video editor application. You need to go with native. Forget Aptio. We're not tool for that. We try to cater to about 90% of the general app needs and app development needs. Due to its nature, it has limited offline capabilities. So if you open an Aptio client and you don't have a network connection, you will still see what was there in the app before. You can navigate around the app. But if you want to submit some information, it requires a turnaround to the server. So it's not fully offline compliant. And then if you need some very specific client components, it's still native development. So it's a little same as with most cross-platform tools. You need to have that part made into native components, so it's normal native code. In our case, the advantage is that we don't have a lot of different versions of our clients. Actually, we maintain only one version of the client, so all the applications are using the same core client code. So the most terrible thing to happen would be that we would start forking the client for different purposes, because then making sure that it stays working when the operating system version is updated becomes too difficult. And then we're not a free tool. I'll show you quickly the additions that we have. But with the money that you pay for the published app, it should be saved on the very moment you start the app development. And then we're a startup company. We come from here, Sofia. We're not a huge company, even though we have existed for several years. We only now, last year, started opening up the platform for external developers. The reason why we're only opening it now is that the way we see it is that if you want to have a great mobile application, you need to be primarily focused on getting an excellent end user experience. Because whether you're a developer or you're a customer who would like to buy an app development, the way you look at some platform, you look at what kind of output you get, what kind of apps, are they functional, do they seem stable, how fast they work. So we spend a lot of time creating apps for clients that compete on the App Store, because most of our clients, they have some kind of consumer-facing apps, and they're competing against other apps. So we've had to make sure that the apps that we put out stand on that competition. And now we've been very happy to see new developers coming to the platform and getting productive very fast, because that's also one of the things that we measure, how fast you're going to get productive when you start working with our tools. So how to make it faster, how to make app development radically faster, because that's what we're doing. One is that the technology stack is limited. At the moment, with the PHP framework that I'm going to show, the only thing that you really need to know is object-oriented PHP. You don't need other skills to get started. And same goes with the Node.js toolkit. It's purely on Node. You don't need to get into native app development. If you're a PHP developer, you don't need to venture out to the JavaScript world. It's all fairly concise. So then, of course, I spoke already about the client, the mobile client code quality, and the fact that there's no difference between the iOS and Android. You develop on one platform. If it doesn't look exactly like that on the other platform, then we have a bug that we need to fix urgently. Luckily, we don't have known bugs at the moment in terms of different display between iOS and Android. The development model where all the changes are pushed from the server side makes agile development possible. Well, it makes it very easy. Because if you're working with a client, so you're developing a mobile app for your client, you give them the prototype version, and then the client wants changes. They don't need to update the client. The changes can be applied in real time. So same that we get with web development. Real-time development, real-time releases, without breaking everything. If you look at the Aptio platform, it's a little like, again, it's Legos, but in this case, they all come from the same manufacturer. So you kind of know that these pieces fit together. And for a lot of these Legos, they are purely on the server side. So whenever mobile operating system is updated, it doesn't affect your building blocks. This I showed already. With Aptio UI Kit, we've seen a tremendous speed boost in development. So when you have the ready-made components, the number of lines of code becomes less. And that's really one of the keys, because the number of lines of code very much determine how long it's going to take to develop something. So we're trying to compress the number of lines of code needed. So one is speed, but one is managing the overall complexity. Because when mobile apps get more complicated, you start having a lot of bugs that come from kind of other parts of the system. So as a summary, where the speed up is coming from, we kind of try to look at all the parts in the mobile app building. On the ideation, we don't have a tool, and we're not going to make a tool for ideation on the mobile apps. But if you work with the UI toolkit, you already have a very good base for building the app concept. We sell it as a license, which is a license per published app, so you can work with the platform without paying. And then when you want to publish, it's a one-time fee, 2,500 euros that you pay for the app. And then, of course, there is a hosting cost for the backend hosting, but that's in line with what you would pay for cloud hosting in general. We've been very happy to start cooperation with few local companies that have onboarded their developers, and also seen how to create competitive advantage by building faster. With hosting, we rely on industry cloud providers. Our cloud of choice is Google Cloud. If you're looking to host something in the cloud, I would say look no further than Google. We've tested different clouds, and the performance that we're seeing from there is just so much better than in other places. The idea with our hosting is that if you know that your app is going to grow, you can have a scalable backend for it automatically without putting any extra work on it. Let's have a look at few apps. Let's see if we manage to get any demo effect, crashing something or something not working. I'll show you a few different apps and talk a little bit about building them. The first application that I'm showing is built for UniCredit. It's for their internal usage. They use it there for collecting more feedback from colleagues. So how it started? There's Alex. How it started with UniCredit? Their HR told us that okay, there's one particular thing that they want to develop inside the company, and they wanted people to give more feedback to each other. So they've been doing some organizational changes, and they wanted to see people giving more feedback to each other. And they thought, okay, application would probably be a cool way to do it. And this is the application that's built for them. It's slightly gamified, so in order to make people use it, it should be a little bit fun. So instead of going straight to, okay, fill in the feedback form about your colleague, you can go and search for different GIF animations. This one's pretty cool. Oh, thank you. I told you to tell me if I speak off the screen. That's better. Let's hide all the other stuff. Oh yes, it moves. So it's built with the Giphy integration. You can go and search with the keyword an animated GIF to send to your colleague. The idea is that you kind of sending postcards. So you say, okay, let's send this card. Then it shows by default, it shows either your reason or your own team. So you have the whole employee directory here. Let's send it to Carmen, who's head of our mobile development. And then they wanted to collect data about different areas that they develop. So the feedback should be related to one of the fundamentals that they track inside the bank. So then finish keyboard. Then you have your boring feedback form. So you say what's excellent, what to maintain, what you want to change, and then you give a subjective measure on how well you did it. And then for these you get points. So you have a kind of a ranking who have been active on giving feedback to colleagues, so that they can reward people who are very active on giving feedback. And then the feedbacks, it's like a little messaging application, so you can then say, okay, this was useful feedback, or I did it because of this. And this is collected on reports. So these they also use then when they have discussions inside the team. So if you're a superior, you can see for your people how they're doing on these different areas. This application, kind of the need for the application, we had a meeting with them on Friday, and since we had a bit of a vested interest, these days they also an investor in Optio. So we thought, okay, let's show them what we can do. So on Tuesday in the afternoon, we pushed them an iOS and Android version of this application. It was a prototype version, but it already had the functionalities that I've shown you today. That gives you an idea what you can do of course, when you know the platform. This is an app that's for UK real estate market. App has 3 different interfaces. So you have the consumer interface, so you can browse here. It's really hard to browse fast on the simulator. So you can set your search parameters. When you register, you tell, okay, I'm interested on these areas, this kind of budget restraints, this is what I'm looking. And then these get saved as your search parameters. And real estate agents can log into the app and search for people that have certain parameters set. So this is the way they're monetizing it. So then when you have a real estate here, once you like it, you can directly start chatting either with a landlord or an agent. Building an app like this, this is built from scratch, so it's not based on any of our templates. It's about 150 hours of work, which is quite little when it comes to mobile development. Okay, Alex might have spent a little bit more in the beginning because he was also learning the platform in the beginning, but that gives you the scale. And here's again Alex. Alex's New Year promise was that he's going to train less. We have quite a few apps that behave like Tinder. So you can match anything. You can match people, or you can match tattoos, as I spoke before. And in case of this app, they want to monetize in various different ways. So if you go to extras, I don't think I've seen many apps that have this many bought options. They did a lot of research on how to monetize a dating app. It's targeting a specific demographic. So if you want to hide your age, or you want more matches than you can get on a day, or just about anything, you have an in-app purchase for that. Then obviously, like on the other app, you have chatting. You have fairly fine-grained preferences on what you can search for. So if you only want to date vegans, this is the app you want to download. You can find it from the App Store. It's called Desi. And then app that I'm going to use as a bit of a test bed. So we're going to make some changes. This is on my local. This is one of our template apps. The idea with our template apps is not that you just take the template and then you release it on the App Store. We do have few apps that are like this, but normally you use it as a base. So you have a lot of the stuff that you need is already there, and then based on the business model app requirements, you make the changes. But you start the project with a lot of the stuff ready. So for example, this app, it's a kind of little like OLX. So you can browse items, you can see the other items of the seller, you can go and buy this item. This now requires for me to register. So you can use the app without registering. You can do searches, filtering. Then you have your registration. We use some device features, so in-app payments and location, and of course notifications. So this is an app that you could use as a base for development. We'll shortly come back to this. When you work with Optio, we had this silly idea at one point that maybe anyone could build an app. And we developed the platform for some time to make it possible to develop, plan apps entirely without coding. Well, it turns out that actually code is a very good way of solving complex problems. If you have a very complex thing that you want to solve, you probably don't want to have a graphical user interface for doing that. But since we did it, you can do quite a lot of things directly on the web interface. So if you want to put some content, you don't need to develop a module for that. It looks a little like, well, it works a little like WordPress. I'll show it in a bit. It's our guys say it's not a beauty to behold, but it works. So if you just want to do content display, you could build an app without doing coding, and you can do that in hours. There are also some more advanced functionalities for doing quizzes and stuff. This kind of an app you can build in days. Then if you want to build an app like one of the apps that I showed you, we're looking at some weeks of development. So there is development. You need to have the business logic, you need to have the data storage, you need to have quite a lot of things in place, so there is some development, but we're not looking into months of development on creating something like that. Then if you really want to go all out, it might require some custom iOS and Android code, but there are really no limitations on how far it can go. So the way it works is we are hosting the app backends, which means that you're working against our server. So you have a real-time access on the server, and the changes that you do reflect real-time on the app. Of course, your app code should be in a Git repository, but when you develop, when you make a change, you see it real time on the app. I'll show that in a bit. And as mentioned, we have these Lego blocks. We call them actions. And action can be just a one page, or it can be just one form, or it can be a complex app on its own. But because it's built from these blocks, it makes it easier to reuse some existing functionality. So if you want to do the registration and the login, you don't need to do extra development for that. You can do visual customizations without going into the code. So you work mainly with your IDE. I hope everyone is using some proper IDE, which is good for development. If you're still using Notepad, stop doing that and download a proper IDE. It's not proper. So you configure your IDE to upload the changes automatically using SFTP to our server. And then once you're ready to move to production, we can move the app to a production server so that you're not making real-time changes all the time. On Android, when you start developing, you can download the Android APK after 5 minutes of creating the app, and that's the app that you use. That's your interface. You can run it on a simulator, or you can run it on a device. With iOS, it's slightly more complicated because how Apple does certification. So we have a specific app for that purpose. So now, if we have non-PHP coders, we might lose some. Hopefully not to the dreamland. What I show is kind of relevant for both PHP and Node.js because the structure of things is very much the same. What we have here, I'll open it. I'll open it on the simulator. I made a little test action here, which is called training, which displays absolutely nothing. And this training part, we will do little edits on, so you see what's happening. Is there someone who doesn't know how MVC frameworks or MVC pattern normally works? Don't be shy. Okay. So I'm not going to explain too much about the MVC. I'll just tell how we implementing it. The idea is that you have the controller, which obviously controls, directs the flow of the application. Our controller uses a model, so each of your actions has a model that can use database table, or then it can rely on the kind of the built-in data storage methods. And then the controller tells which view to use, and this view uses components. So a lot of the things that you build in Aptio, they coming from components, and the idea is, of course, to make things as reusable as possible. So even if you be developing something from the scratch, it makes sense to put that code into components, because then you can use them across different actions, so across different functionalities. So this is how these main files for our action look like. So we're first going to do a little hello world using code. Then I show a little hello world directly on the browser, and we build it from there. I will just quickly show from here. So these are different apps that I have. So I've configured certain modules to be used with this app. I think there's something funny. And these modules in themselves can have themes. So for example, if you're building a registration, you can use the existing register action and simply extend it with the theme. So you can, from the theme, you can override anything that happens on the main action. So when you download the project files, you get the main actions, and then you get your own themes that you work with. Does this make sense? Oh yes. It's sorry, I won't be able to show it. It's my local development instance, so I don't have there's some IP restrictions in place for our modules manager. That's why it didn't work. This is a view file, so this is the most simple example action that you can have. There isn't any controller method, so it's using the controller method from the main controller. So there's one called action default. There's a little example code here. So by default, the controller will include a file called view, and it will supply it with an array of data. So this data, it can be based on the user input, it can come from the model, and if it comes from the model, it can come from basically anywhere. We send that to the view, and inside the view, we have different parts for the view. So we have this layout, and if I want to put something that's scrollable, I put it in the scroll. Or if you want to put something in the header, you write it like this. Footer. Let's put a text element there. So we have hello world, put into the header. Let's comment that out. So now when we update the action, we see the changes here real time. This is not super interesting yet, but hello world never is. Well, actually, that's the most interesting part with many projects. I'll just quickly go into the web interface. I have another test thing here. So in this application, the side menu is built automatically. So I can configure on the web, I can put new stuff, and if I configure it right, it will show up on the side menu. Of course, you don't want always your menu to look like this. So like, for example, here, your side menu looks different. You have your profile picture, the menu looks different. But for development, it's easiest to work with the default menu. So we have this intro branch. Let's refresh. So when I do refresh on the main view, it basically picks up all the updated data. If we have nothing changed, we don't need to transfer anything. So the client is telling server that, okay, I have this and this data, this kind of checksums. If there's something changed, then we send the changed data. And basically everything that you see here is already known by the client. So you don't see loading here. Then you have things like if you want to bookmark something, there is a call happening on the background, but in order to update the interface, we don't need to make a turnaround to the server, so that you can get the responsive feel to the app. So on this, currently we have, it's just 3 static pictures. Let's add something new. So we're gonna do the hello world here. Let's put it as first. Can you see well enough? Should I put a little bigger font? So we have quite a few existing modules that you can use. Now we're going to use the simplest of them all. So it's just the message. We're going to make it active and say hello world. Let's put some media for it also. So we're going to put a portrait image. You have your media library. This is very much like working with WordPress, maybe. So we created a new action. Now what we need to do, we need to update the apps data on the main view. And then we have the intro part here. So for content, if you want videos, pictures, text, stuff like this, you can do it pretty well here. For our purposes, we're gonna go back here and let's add just a little bit of functionality. So we have here an action called login, which gives us a login screen. So we're just gonna make a we'll put on the footer. This will look a little ugly, but you see when you use a proper IDE, you have the documentation. Also, we have inline documentation for the basic framework that or the basic toolkit that you use. So you can always go and see, okay, what parameters this exactly is taking. You can also do it by using our documentation site. So the parameter that we're going to put here, we're going to attach an on-click event for it. And then you see different kind of on-clicks here. In this case, we're going to open another action. And we will use the permanent name of the login action to do this. You think it's going to work? So now you have the go to login. Visually, it could use a little improvement, obviously. When you press it, it goes to the login screen. And this way, with the different on clicks, so let's take a look at what kind of you can do various different things. So you want to ask for a push permission. Let's go back to our training. Now it's going to ask me for a push permission. Now if I don't, because asking for push permission works differently on iOS and Android, so I would probably put a condition there that, okay, this is only shown for the iOS. Or if I want to say that, okay, for the on-click, you can put several different things. So you could say, okay, ask for the push permission and move to the login screen. Make sense? Now, obviously, it doesn't look very good. We have no, it just takes the default styling. We use styling that, if you worked with CSS, will look very, very familiar. It's not actually CSS, but we use the same notation. So you will find style notation like this. The idea is same as with the website, so your client will know all the styles. If the styles change, client picks up the style changes, but it always can refer to these styles, so we don't need to make a lot of traffic back and forth between the server. Let's take here, maybe we have some button style. No, we don't. Let's see if there's something that we could use. Let's use this one. So I simply say style. Let's get this back to. So then when you update it, you have a button style. You can work same as with the HTML. You can work with inline styles, though of course we discourage that because then you need to be sending the much more data to the client. Now to understand what is happening here, I'm going to show you a little on the traffic, what's going on between the client and the server. So let's open the if we open the console view for the iOS app, we'll see that it's making calls to the backend. Let me find a call to the backend here. So we're looking for refresh action. So here, oh yeah. That's a little better. So what happens here when I pull down or do something else that requires an update? It calls the server, and quite simply, the server is returning us a JSON payload. And inside this JSON payload, we can have a lot of stuff that's hidden, of course. So little like working with divs on HTML, you can push data to the client that's already present there, but it's not visible. So you can create very responsive interface, which doesn't require constant turnarounds to the server. Okay, let's see about another basic thing. Let's collect little data. So we'll add a text field here, and we change the functionality of our own click to submit, and you can provide a menu ID that is calling so that our controller knows what's going on. And I will take the controller code here. So we have the, and I will move it to my theme. So now it works the same way, because we're always extending. We don't need a lot of this stuff, but let's keep it in place for now. So what we have here now is a simple form field. It's there, it just doesn't have a background color at the moment. So this is a form field. And when we press this button, it will submit the data. So this data is now available for our controller or our model. So what we can do here is that we can say if the menu ID equals update, let's take these away, and let's take the validate page function. So again, my theme model by default is empty. So now, by using this, we can take the data that was just updated. So we can say this. And then I need to tie in on the view. I still need to tell what is the name for this field. So I'm going to put this content, and then I'm going to tell that this variable is called my name. So now I will have my name available for the model. Like this. So if I want to do validation, I would do it here on the model, and then I would simply access the validation status, pass it over to the view, and this way we just inputted some data to our application. So the application carries a lot of data related to the user. If you go, you'll see this is just the basic set. We haven't done registration, we haven't done login. So we have these variables related to this user, and this is kind of the simplest way on getting data, manipulating data, setting states. Of course, it extends then further for using custom tables and custom data, or if you want to build a link to another system, you would probably do it in the model as well. Questions at this point? Let's have a look whether we have any. That is if our web app is. Okay, apparently a lot of sounds, notions. Oh, I'm Finnish. Someone asked my nationality. There was one more question about promoting apps in general. I'm not going to go very deep on that question. Sorry, that would be a lecture on its own. Normally, what we've seen our clients do, which work fairly well, Facebook advertising. And at the moment, App Store advertising is a fairly cost-effective medium for doing advertising for the app. But then it's like advertising anything else. You probably do promotions, whatever the target group of the app is. Possibly some marketing videos. We just saw a pretty cool video from one of our clients. The difference there is, of course, that what you want to do, what is the intent, is you want people to install the application. And Facebook provides pretty good advertising format for that. They have directly the install button that you probably see quite often on your Facebook feed. In terms of going deeper into developing the Aptio apps, best place to go is our documentation site. So basically everything that's with the toolkit you will find documented from here. And then when you want to take the next step and actually start developing something, from our main website, start your project. It will create what we call a sandbox account. So you can start configuring your first application. Word of warning, the onboarding experience is still under works, but we are here to help. So don't hesitate to contact if you're serious about getting into developing Aptio apps. We'd be happy to walk you through the steps. I'll just quickly give a glimpse on the any Node.js developers here? No? Okay. Then just in case we have some on the web audience. As you can see, the structure is very much the same as with the PHP toolkit. Of course, the syntax that you're working with is different, but all the basic core principles work the same. And you can also use existing modules that are PHP based with your app if you want. So at least to my eye, with Node.js, you get a slightly cleaner syntax, a little easier. There's a little less code to write in many cases, but all the basic principles work the same. So once we have the Node.js toolkit out, you just simply do npm install Aptio, and you will get your dependencies. On the PHP, I'll show quickly on the sandbox how it looks once you get inside there. By default, your application doesn't have modules configured. You can use all the built-in modules. So when you start creating the app, you will have access to all these built-in modules. But then if you want to start developing on top of a module, or you want to create your own new action module, this will happen from the modules part. You will need to provide your SSH key, and then you will see all the modules that are available for development, and you can start creating your own themes for those. Cool. I'm not going to keep you here until 10. We covered today quite a lot of ground. We looked at mobile development in general. I hope I haven't discouraged you from venturing out into mobile development. It can be a bit of a jungle out there, but it's also a lot of fun. It's very rewarding to work with mobile apps in general. We looked at a few different tools. If you're into JavaScript, go with React Native. If you want to develop from the beginning on your own. Other than that, your mileage may vary, but I hope to see some more mobile developers soon. Thank you very much all for coming. If you still have questions, now is the time to ask. Then what happens is yeah, with in case of Optio, we help you to get it published. So we push it automatically to store on your behalf. So you need to have your own accounts for Google Play Store and App Store. Yes, you need iOS developer account, which is I think it's $95 a year at the moment. So it's not a huge cost there, but you need to have the account, and then you're responsible for pushing it to Apple. We of course give you some guidance there because we pushed a lot of apps, so we can pretty much tell if there's something that Apple wouldn't like, and warn you in advance about that. At fastest on App Store, you can get the app approved in 24 hours. Google Play Store 2 hours. So it's more straightforward these days. Let's see if we have any other. Oh, progressive web apps. I'm just very quickly going to say back because I was muted at the time that topic came up. In short, progressive web apps definitely are gaining popularity. Whether they will take over the apps is a different question. And whether I would develop one using PHP is somewhat questionable. There are frameworks for PHP for doing that, but to the nature of apps, whether they progressive web apps or native apps, it's much more asynchronous in nature when you develop, and PHP is really not the best tool to handle that. Any more lectures? I don't know. Let's see. I hope today was useful for you. I had a nice time telling you about mobile application development. I leave my business cards here. Don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions or notions. And of course, general feedback is always welcome. Thank you, guys.